Alright, so we got it off, and everything went okay. It was super heavy for the three of us. I don't know that we're going to be able to get it back on here the same way we got it off, so we might have to figure something out, but otherwise it went okay. And that's what the differential looks like. And that right in the middle of the screen is the primary oil pump that feeds the front hydraulic pump. So I might call my mechanic and see if there's anything else I should be looking at or testing while I'm in here while I've got this off. So that transmission oil pump is actually pretty cheap. So it seems like if that needs some attention, this would be a good time to dig into it, but I don't want to have to do this again. So then we'll go into the shop and I'll show you the part that's not working right. Alright, so this is the piece. This is the bottom side of it. And you can see right there where the gasket has been blown out, and that's the back side. So this is the, I guess the front of the, toward the front of the tractor. So the part where most of my video was taken was from back here. So this was blowing up against the transmission wall, but it was shooting right out the front of there. And so one thing that I'm noticing, and I don't know if I can get the video to show it very well, but that part of the plate looks like it's raised up to me. It's tight on the corners and raised up in the middle. So that's why that gasket blew out, I'm guessing. So I don't know, I might have to get a new plate or have this machined or something. So anyway, when we get it off, we'll check it. I'll put it on my cast iron table saw table and we'll see how flat it is. But that's it, and that was the problem. So that's the high pressure leak. So the oil wasn't going back to the pump and it was cavitating. Doesn't take much of a leak, and that's actually a pretty big leak, hydraulically speaking. So you also see we have the 4 bolts on there that have the wires going through them. And I haven't looked at my new bolts, but hopefully they're drilled already. But basically those are drilled and there's wires holding them. And I guess these plates are notorious for building up pressure and popping the heads off those bolts, and so they're wired so that they don't drop down into the transfer case and ruin some gears. So alright, well, we'll get working on this, and then after we get this done, we'll check into the remote valves and get those all repaired and all that. Alright, we're going to go ahead and pull this plate off. I looked at my new bolts, and they don't have the holes drilled in them. So I may have to have somebody drill holes in them, or ask somebody what the best way to wrap those in wire is. The new bolts are grade 8, and I think these old bolts are softer. So it may be a bit of a problem drilling through the grade 8 bolts, plus that weakens them. So we'll see. Let's go ahead and get this off here. So yesterday we got the Rockshaft cover off and brought into the shop, and you got a little glimpse of the plate that was here right on top of this. That's the shaft arm, and we had these 4 bolts. They have holes drilled in them, and they were wired together in case the top pops off. These are soft bolts, and the mechanic that I was talking to recommended using grade 8 bolts, which is the strongest bolt. And John Deere now provides new bolts as grade 8 bolts. So that problem's been solved, and the mechanic that I've been working with said the grade 8 bolts don't need to be wired because they won't break. So that's good. The other thing I started looking at was this plate. So this is a cast plate, and it's not flat. And I'm not sure if you can see it very well, but if you look down that edge, you can see it's got a curve to it. And that's both on the front and the back. So, you know, looking at these two ends, the thing basically has a dish like that. And this end is the end that had blown the gasket out. And so I'm pretty sure that was part of the problem. These bolts were almost just finger tight. I barely took any effort at all with the ratchet. I tried to loosen one with my fingers, but I couldn't get it. But so they've been stretched out. So I've ordered a new plate, so we can't put that plate back on there. Since that's cast, the mechanic I've been working with said that there's a chance that there's a crack in it, so it's not really worth trying to get it machined or anything. Plus there's that groove where the O-ring sits in it, and that's got to be equal all the way around. So luckily I called the John Deere dealer, and they still make these covers, or they still have these covers, I should say. He said they stopped making them in 1994, so luckily we can still get our hands on one. They're like $100, so not cheap, but you gotta have it. So so the next thing that we're gonna do is in the end here where this shaft comes through, there's a seal and a bushing behind that, and then an O-ring, and there's one on each side. So I've gotten replacement ones of those, so I'm going to attempt to pull this out. I couldn't get this arm off over here, so I don't know how likely we are to get this all apart. I don't have specialty tools and stuff, but that bolt right there is really the only thing I think that's holding the whole thing in there, and there's some tapers on the shaft and whatnot. So this bolt here. So we'll try to get that bolt out and try to get that shaft out. Might probably have to get that arm off unless it pulls out this direction. I think the way it looked on the picture on the John Deere site, it looks to me like it only pulls out one direction. So we'll get cracking on that, and then if we can't get far on that, then we can switch over and start doing the selective control valves. So that's SCV. So that bolt was in there. That was pretty loose, and it's got a little locking tab on it. So I was able to get this other arm off with a little bit of tapping with the hammer. I think the shaft has to slide out this way, so we'll give that a try. So I did have some leaks coming out of these before, and that was, since I'm pulling this off, no better time to get them fixed. One thing that we want to be sure we do, this arm that is connected to the piston for the rock shaft, it's on a splined, the shaft is splined right where this coupler is, and so what we need to do is mark the shaft and the coupler to be sure we get it back on in the same position. And then it has stopping points, so we know which directions to put the arms on afterwards. And then this has a bolt hole where the bolt was. So other than this here, we know pretty much where stuff goes. So I'm going to try to mark this with a Sharpie or something. I don't know if I can get down in here very well, but we'll give it a try. I'll try the punch method first. Yeah, that didn't work very well, and it won't fit all the way down in there, so. Okay, well I can't fit anything down in that crack, so I marked the shaft on this side, and I marked the arm here, so See if I can get it out that way. So there's one of the seals that came off. And we'll see if we can keep pushing it through. Alright, so there's the shaft. Still got our marks on there, so that should be good. So there's two O-rings in here. One of them is right here, and the other one's right here. So this area right here is under hydraulic pressure. So those O-rings, they run on the shaft to keep the oil pressure in here. And then the seals on the outside here, there's a hydraulic fluid that comes in here and it lubricates the bushings, which I've never done anything with before. I'm not sure if you can see that, but on the side there's a big crack. I think that part needs to be replaced as well. I'm assuming that's not a design. Okay guys, so I talked to my mechanic again, and there's a couple of issues here. One, we have this part. You can see that crack. See, there's a crack right here that goes right across where the bolt goes through and across the other side, and my mechanic said he's never seen that before, and that's not supposed to be like that. So that's another $100 part, and I'm not sure if it was broken before or if it's something that I did when I was trying to get the shaft out, or maybe when I was trying to get one of the arms off before I took the rock shaft off the tractor. So I don't know, could have already been broken. Not typically something that breaks. I got one of the bushings out. You kind of just have to mangle it and get it out. It has a seam. And then I've got the two new bushings here. And to press them in, I talked to another John Deere mechanic. They're two different size bushings, but he basically said to just cut a piece of plate material and fit it in there. So I've got this one that fits in on this side, and we'll use that to push the bushing in, and then the bigger one is on this side. So, and that bushing's still in there. You can see it. So we got a couple of parts that we'll be waiting for to finish this up. The O-ring can be lubed. These O-rings here that hold the hydraulic pressure in, the big ones, those ones there, they can be pre-lubed with hydraulic oil or grease. It doesn't matter. Okay, so we're ready to put the seals back in. We're going to start putting this whole thing back together. So I got the first seal in there, and you know, if you've got something flat to pound the seal in with so it goes in evenly, that's the key, or else it'll bend. So I just used the end of the shaft, this flat part here, to push it in since it's bigger. So we'll do the other side. Well, actually first the shaft goes in, and we got to put all that part together too. We got to put the Rockshaft arm and piston back in. That's this beast here. And then we've got a couple new parts. Okay, so we got this the cam lobe, or the cam, don't know exactly what it does, but it goes on the shaft here. So this is the one that was cracked. So as we slide the shaft in, then this goes on the shaft, and then it goes in the bolt hole on the shaft. There's a bolt with a locking tab. So if you remember before, we marked this. And I'm trying to find where I marked it. So I've also got the new bushings and the O-rings in. Okay, after a fair amount of beating, I finally got that shaft in there. I think the new bushings are pretty tight. So I think I was able to turn the shaft when I hooked the arms on it. So I think it should be all right. So one thing you want to make sure you don't forget, which I did, is to rub some hydraulic oil or whatever on the inside of your seal. When I first pushed the shaft through, it caught on the edge and didn't slide over, and I had to push the shaft back out, and luckily I didn't damage the seal. So just be sure you lube them up before you put them in. Okay, now I've got this in here, my bolt, and then I'll just tighten that. Then we'll bend the tab over and we'll put the seal in on the other side. Alright, so I've got this bolt in and I have the tab on there and I have the tab bent up. Now I need to put the seal on this side. The seal's a little bit harder because on the last one you had a whole flat spot to pound in. This one you have the shaft sticking out, so it's going to be a little bit harder. Get some hydraulic oil on there. Alright, so that old part came in handy. I used that to pound on the seal. Worked really good. Okay, so we've got the shaft back in, the piston arms back in, it moves on there. The next thing is our new plate. So if you remember, our old plate was warped. It had a high spot on it, so I had to order a new one. Luckily, they still have some of these because they stopped making them. So there's our new plate, John Deere green. And this one looks much better. I looked at it at the shop before I brought it home. Okay, so we have the O-ring that goes in there. Okay, so all of this basically was because of that plate, bent plate, and the gasket that was blown out. The old bolts were really soft. The new bolts are grade 8, which is the hardest bolt, and they've got the yellow Loctite on them already. So I'm just going to snug these down right now. I need to get the torque spec. I called the John Deere guys and they said it was 8.5 foot-pounds. And I just have trouble believing that. So I'm going to talk to the mechanic that I've been using. So far he's given me super good advice and see what he said. He said it was either 27 foot-pounds or 43 foot-pounds or something like that. So that's everything on this side, and before I flip it over and start working on the other side, I need to scrape the gaskets off the other side. I've already done this side, and then I do need to torque this first though, so I'm gonna see if I can get a hold of that mechanic and see what the torque specs are. Alright, so I got the torque specs for these bolts. It's 37 foot-pounds. Yeah, 8 would have been way too light. Okay, still looks good and flat. I was able to tip this a little bit and I scraped the gasket off where the Rockshaft control valve goes on this bottom side. So I think the next thing really is to make sure the tractor is clean and get it all ready to put the gasket on and set this back on there. Okay, so I've cleaned up the top of this with acetone. I'm not sure if that does anything. It took off some stuff, some oil and stuff. And I cleaned the tractor up with acetone, and so now I'm just gonna wait when the boys are ready. Then we'll lug this thing back out there and try to set it back up on the tractor. It's not gonna be an easy job, but we'll do it. And then we'll start putting everything back together.